All right, we're back, back in our normal places of business in our house, at our houses. Tom's back home, and I'm back home from the beach, and we're on chapter 9 here. All right, let's go. During the preceding September, we had arranged to meet a party in the Gobi Desert, and they were to accompany us to the site of 3 of the ancient ruined cities, the locations of which are given by some of these records. While we had not, as yet, seen these records, we had been told of their existence. I remember hearing about these records. We were going to examine them as well. Those which we had previously seen and which had aroused our curiosity were but copies of the records we had before us. Okay? Both of the sets placed the dates of these cities back 200,000 years. It is claimed that the inhabitants were in a high state of civilization, as they knew the arts and crafts and were able to work with the metals. That gold was a very common metal, so common they used it in making drinking vessels and for shoeing their horses. It is claimed that these people had a good command over all the natural forces as well as their own God-given powers. In fact, the legends, if legends they are, as told therein, are quite similar to those of Greek mythology. If the maps are correct, this huge empire covered the greater portion of Asia and extended into Europe as far as the Mediterranean Sea, where France is now located, and the greatest elevation was about 600 feet above sea level. It is claimed that this was a great plain area, very productive and well populated, and a colony of the motherland. There is no question that if the remains of these cities can be found and uncovered, some very valuable history will be disclosed, as the description the records gave of this country far outshone that of ancient Egypt for pomp and splendor during the dynasties of its 7 kings. Even before the reign of these kings, it is described as being far more prosperous. The people ruled themselves. There were no wars and no vassals or slaves. They unquestionably named their ruler directive principle, and they loved and obeyed that directive principle. These records state that the first king of the first dynasty usurped the rule from the directive principle and set himself upon a throne as ruler. Time had passed rapidly. We were busy getting everything in readiness to join the expedition, as we were obliged to be on our way in order to keep our appointment in May at the meeting place agreed upon. We were to replenish our supplies and equip the main expedition for the final journey. Words absolutely fail me when I undertake to record my thoughts and feelings as the time for our departure drew near. Every hour of our stay had been a joy, not one being dull. Although we had been with these people and shared their homes for more than 5 months, the time had passed so rapidly that it seemed but a few days. Yet a world of possibilities had been opened to us. It was as though the door had been thrown wide open. Everyone felt the boundless possibilities, and still we hesitated to step through the door, just as we hesitated to leave these magnificent people whom we looked upon as brothers. I believe there's a time in the life of every mortal when he or she can see the door fully open, just as each of us saw it that beautiful April morning, and each and every one can see the vast possibilities that may be attained. I am going to ask the readers to throw aside all prejudices for a time, and if they are able to do so, see as we saw. I do not expect you to believe, but I do want you to understand that it is one thing to write about these people, an entirely different thing just to sit at their feet and listen. No doubt this is true. It seems that if we would walk boldly up and step through the door, all attainment would be ours. Yet we hesitated. And this, I guess we're seeing the dweller on the threshold, as we have discussed so many times before. Why was it so? Because we did not fully believe. We allowed tradition to drag us back and close the door. Then we said the hand of fate had closed it to us. But we must come to realize there is no fate save that which we ourselves allow. And, this is an interesting thing to ponder here. But if we look at, white magic, and we look at from Bethlehem to Calvary, and we look at raisin initiations in the ageless wisdom, we see that there is a progression of these. This is a progression, and it cannot be, stages can't be skipped over as easily as people would like to believe, I want to say. And we know, and this is told to us by, essentially by Master DK. The only way to really skip, over aspects of it is if we had done the work in previous lives and we're recapitulating. So there's that. Here we were a kindly, simple yet most magnificent people. Here were a kindly, simple yet most magnificent people. Some of whom for generations and perhaps always have lived just through that door, and that life is practical to them. There is no precedent nor tradition here, nothing but a pure, honest life, well lived and lived right here on this earth. I leave it to the reader to make the contrast. We did hesitate to leave these dear, kindly souls to whom we had become so attached in the last few months, yet we know that other things awaited us and we look forward eagerly to them. Well, maybe that's the mistake right there. They weren't willing to drop all that they were doing to stay with them. I'm just pondering. You're looking forward to other things, which means there's still a desire nature, which means we're still dealing with the astral essentially there. Or not. I'm just pondering as well. So, but if we look at it that way, if we're looking at the chart, these emotions and desire nature is over here on the sixth plane, that of the astral. Excuse me. We bade our friends goodbye that beautiful April morning with cordial handshakes and salutations amid hearty invitations to come again. With a final goodbye and Godspeed, our faces were turned northward, this time actually to cross the Great Gobi with its tale of terrible hardships as dim visions in our imaginations. But we were unafraid, for Emil and Jess were again with us, and Chandra Sen in Nepro's place. To us, who had visited many lands as the company swung along the trail, it was but a part of the day's work. Everyone in our little band was glad to be there. Not one but recognized that a new world had begun to open and unfold. All recognized the remoteness of the country and the hazards of an ordinary trip of this nature, yet there was that irresistible urge to go on. With the absolute confidence we had in our great friends, all fear and thought of inconvenience for self was thrown into the winds, and we entered into the zest of the things with the enthusiasm of schoolboys. Well, that sounds fantastic. We were accustomed to the remote places of the earth, but never had we experienced a country so remote, yet one where we could travel with the freedom and ease that we were experiencing here. Do you wonder that we were infatuated with the country and our benefactors? We felt that we could go right on north until we had negotiated the polar regions and conquered them. We had not gone far when one of our party remarked, "If we could travel as those fellows can, this part would be easy. Just because we cannot travel as they do, they plod along with us." All went well until the evening of the seventh day out. At about 5 o'clock that afternoon, we were just emerging from a deep ravine, which we had followed down in order to gain access to the more open country below, when one of the party called out that there were horsemen in the distance. We turned our glasses upon them and counted 27 horsemen who seemed to be fully armed. We reported this to Jas, and he said they probably were one of the roving bands that infest the country. We asked if they were one of the bandit bands, and he had said he suspected they were, as they did not appear to be tending any flocks. We left the trail and proceeded to a clump of trees and made camp for the night. While the camp was being prepared, two of our party crossed the stream near which we were camping and climbed to the top of the ridge that would give them an outlook over the rolling country. When they had gained the summit, they stopped and, placing their field glasses to their eyes, stood for a moment, then turned and hurried toward camp. As soon as they came within hailing distance, they reported that the party of horsemen was not over 3 miles away and was riding toward our camp. At this time, someone remarked that he believed it was going to storm. We looked, and sure enough, there was a heavy bank of clouds gathering in the northwest, and fog was drifting in from every direction. We became very uneasy as we could now see the band of horsemen through the approaching storm coming down a rolling slope directly towards our camp. Well, let me see. We looked, and sure enough, there was a heavy bank of clouds gathering in the northwest, and fog was drifting in from every direction. We became very uneasy as we could now see the band of horsemen through the approaching storm coming down a rolling slope directly towards our camp. We were very much disturbed about the appearance of this band. Although there were 32 in our party, we did not have a firearm of any description. At the moment the storm broke upon us with all the fury of a blizzard at that moment. For a few moments, the wind lashed and roared and drove the fine particles of snow around us with fury of a 70-mile gale, and it looked as if we would be obliged to move our camp to escape the falling limbs that were being broken from the trees by the storm. Then everything became calm where we were, and we thought for a moment that it had been only a squall, such as often happens in that country, and that it would soon blow over. Since there was a dim half light which enabled us to see, we turned to and set the camp in order. We were occupied with this work for about half an hour and had not given a thought to either the storm or the supposed bandits who had caused so much uneasiness a short time before. As we stopped a moment for breath, our chief walked to the entrance of the tent and looked out, then turned and said, "The storm seems to be raging a short distance away, but where we are, there is scarcely a breath of air stirring. Just look, the tents and trees around are hardly moving, and the air seems warm and balmy." A number of our party followed him outside, and we stood for a moment wondering. While we had been in the tent and occupied, we had been half conscious of the noise the storm was making, but we supposed it had blown over and was traveling up the ravine, as some storms in that country come on like a cyclone and travel for miles before they expend their fury, and after they have passed, there is a dead calm. This was not the case here. The blizzard was raging with all its fury within 100 feet of us, but where we stood, the air was still and warm. Our former experience had been that the cold was intense and pierced one pierced one through and through, while the wind drove icy needle-like particles of snow around, and along with it, blinding fury until one was nearly suffocated. Suddenly, the circle lighted up as if by magic. As we stood wondering, we thought we heard shouts of men above the din of the storm. Supper was announced. We went in and sat down. While we were eating, one of the party wondered what had become of the horsemen we had seen descending the slope. Another said we thought we had heard shouts while we were outside and wondered if we could not be of some assistance in the case they were lost in the blizzard. Jas stated that these men belonged to one of the most notorious bands of bandits which roamed the nearby country. He added that they did nothing but rob and plunder villages and drive off the herds of sheep and goats. After supper, during a lull in the storm, we could hear shouting and lunging and snorting of horses, sounding as though they would break from control. Although they seemed but a short distance away, we could now see them. So dark and dense was the snow that was whirling along by the wind, neither could we see any sign of camp. In a few moments, Emil arose and said he would invite them to our camp. Unless they were well prepared, it would be impossible for man or beast to survive the storm until morning, as the cold was growing intense outside. As he was preparing to leave the tent, two of our party asked to be permitted to accompany him. Emil seemed pleased. He accepted, and they disappeared in the storm. After about 20 minutes had elapsed, they reappeared, followed by 20 of the bandit band leading their horses. They told us afterwards that 7 had become separated from them and were probably lost in the storm. Those who gathered in our circle were a unique and motley lot of half-wild looking creatures. The moment they entered the circle of light, they became suspicious that there was some plot to capture them. They showed their alarm until Emil assured them that they were at liberty to go anytime they wished and showed them that we had no mode of defense if they wished to attack us. This, their leader said they had prepared to do when they saw us emerge from the ravine before the storm came on. After the storm came, they had become bewildered and lost their way, so they did not know where the camp was located. When Emil and the 2 from our party had found them, they were huddled together against a cliff about 100 yards downstream. The leader said if they were driven out, they would certainly perish. Emil assured them that this would not happen. They made their horses secure for the night among the trees, then gathered in a group by themselves, sat down, and began eating dried goat meat and yak butter, which they had taken from their saddle pouches. While they were thus occupied, they kept their arms near at hand and would start and listen at any increased sound. They talked and gesticulated freely. Jas told us that they were wondering at our equipment and the light, why the wind was not blowing, why it was warm within the circle, and why the horses were so content. One of the party who was doing the most talking had heard of our friends before. He was telling the group that these people were like gods and could destroy them, the bandits, in an instant if they would. Jas also said that some of the party were attempting to influence the others to take everything we had and go on, as they thought it was a plot to capture them, but that this one man was standing firm that we should not be molested. He was telling them that if they did harm us, they would all be destroyed. After the talk had gone on for considerable time, 8 of them arose and came over to us and told Jas they would not stay, but they were very much afraid and were going to try and go to their camp, as was located on the same stream but a few miles below. They had been able to get around to get their location. They had been able to get their location from the clump of trees where we were encamped. They then mounted their horses and rode away downstream. In about 20 minutes, they all returned, saying the snow had fallen so deep their horses could not travel and faced a storm, which was the heaviest they had experienced for many years. They had began making themselves comfortable for the night. One of our parties said, "Well, I suppose they will be more comfortable here, even if they are afraid, than they would be out in the storm." Jas turned to us and said, "The Father's house is where you are abiding. If you are within that house and do there abide, you are in the glad spirit of the Father. Of what avail is the warmth and cheer that abides within the house if you are not of the house, or know not the warmth and cheer that abides therein? You may invite those that remain just without, and they will not enter, for they know not where you abide. These dear ones here, while they feel the warmth, will not come nearer for the reason that they have always preyed upon their fellow men, and they cannot understand that those same men whom they have looked upon as legitimate prey should befriend them without some reason for doing so, especially as they do not belong to their band. They do not know that within the snow or cold or heaviest storm the Father abides, and that those who make his home their home and therein abide cannot be harmed by storm or wind or tide. It is only when you are out of contact with God that the winds, the storms, and the tides sweep over you. It is when one can stand steadfastly and unwaveringly with his eyes fixed directly on God, knowing and seeing no other, that he can accomplish what you now see. Our thought is, I stand steadfastly with my eyes fixed on you, O Father, knowing not but you, Father, and I see not but God in all things. I stand firmly on the holy mount, knowing not but your love, life, and wisdom. Your divine spirit pervades me always. It surrounds me and abounds within and without me always. I know, Father, that this is not for me alone, but it is for all thy children. I know, Father, that I have not but that which they have, and there is not but God for all. Thank thee, Father. The real peace, now these are real prayers we're hearing here. The real peace may be found in the heart of the storm, but deep in the heart of the man who has found himself is the true calm. On the contrary, man may be in the remote wilderness alone with the twilight and the vast silence of nature, and yet be torn by winds of passion or shaken by the thunders of fear. Nature, carelessly observed, seems to have given brute strength, greed, and capacity for shedding weaker animals' blood an incomparable advantage. Nature, carelessly observed, seems to have given brute strength, greed, and capacity for shedding weaker animals' blood an incomparable advantage. But notice the following simple facts that few have thought about. There are more lambs in the world than lions. That is not an accident. Nature is not a blind, blundering thing. Nature is God at work, and God neither wastes material nor does he blunder in his building. And I've heard it said that God is neither wasteful nor capricious. Does it not strike you as a strange thing that in the melting pot of nature's primal forces, the lion had not eaten up the lamb before man appeared upon the scene? The lamb has literally whipped the lion in the struggle for existence, nor is it man siding with the lamb against the lion that explains the result. In all probability, man began his career of slaughter by killing the docile first. It is certain that he kills more lambs than lions. It is not man, but nature that pronounces condemnation of lion's kin. Reflect a moment and you will see that nature cannot give distinctive strength in opposite directions to the same animal. The lion is a great fighter, but a slow breeder. All the strength of his fine body goes to the fighting form. Having young is detrimental and becomes the incident of his life. The lamb, on the other hand, is not a fighter and therefore is weak. The lamb spends no energy in fighting and accordingly is a better breeder. Nature acknowledges that in creating the lion, she made a mistake. She is correcting that mistake. The lion and all other animals whose instincts is to kill are disappearing. Wow. That is rather deep there. There are no exceptions to this sentence of extinction pronounced by nature's immutable law against all beings of the preying kind. Nature rules according to an eternal equity. By the very law of the universe, the fighter fights a losing battle, always has and always will, whether he be the animal or the animal man, in the forest or in the city, now and forever. The lion loses. He loses when he wins. He dies when he kills. He is by the very nature of things eating his own kind. When he rends the warm flesh of the lamb, he tore from the flock. When the first lion struck his prey with his mighty paw and growled through his bloody chops, the delight he felt, he was singing, not the death of the helpless that he was eating, but the funeral hymn of his own kind. Savagery is a poor rallying point. Lions do not herd. Bears do not go in flocks. Savages among men form small groups and fight each other. Wilderness turns on its own kind among beasts or men, and is a source of weakness. In the analogy of things wild beasts must go. No great soldier ever really conquered anything. His victories are all illusions. Soldiers' empires, if they rest on nothing more substantial than the sword, swiftly fall to pieces. In the end, the soldier must repudiate force and resort to justice and reason, or their empires crumble. The beast of prey, whether he is brute or human, is solitary, hopeless, and helpless, irrevocably doomed, for gentleness is the real strength. Gentleness is the lion with all of the lion's attributes except the taste for blood, and slowly all life is becoming beneath its all-conquering rule. Man is made or unmade by himself. In the armory of thought, he forges the weapons by which he destroys himself. He also fashions the tools which he builds for himself, heavenly mansions of joy, strength, and peace. By the right choice and true application of thought, man ascends to divine perfection. By the abuse and wrong application of thought, he descends below the level of the beast. Between these two extremes are all of the grades of character, and man is their maker and master. There's a very powerful statement that we had just read there. I had to pause the video and copy that off to a document. These bandits are the remnants of a once great and prosperous people. Their forefathers inhabited this country when it was a beautiful, thriving industrial empire. They knew the sciences and arts. They also knew their own origin and power, and they worshiped that origin and power only. There came a time when they began to look to the body for pleasure, and in time the body failed them. When a great cataclysm swept over the land, devastating it and leaving only a few scattered people on the higher ground, these developed into communities and became the larger races of Europe. The region where we are, that of the Gobi, were cut off and raised bodily until nothing grew. The people were so nearly destroyed that there were only a few isolated communities, and at times, only one or two families left. These gathered in bands and are the ancestors of the present people. They cannot prosper as they are continually at war with each other. While their history and origin have been forgotten, their religion and legends can be traced to the one source. Wherever you find them, you will find some of the fundamentals alike, although their forms differ widely. When we were leaving, two of the men asked if they could join our party, as we were expecting to recruit a number of helpers in the next large village about 70 miles further on. We gladly accepted them, and they were with us until we returned that fall. Let's do chapter 10 as well. Chapter 10, one morning, the party which relieved our chief's party reported that there were horsemen approaching our camp from the north. When we reached the surface, we found they were headed in our direction, and it looked as though they were another bandit band, since they were evidently following the trail we had made on our way here. As we stood looking, Jas came up and said, "They are a party of bandits who are determined to loot the camp, but I do not think we need fear." We waited for them to approach, and they came on to within 500 yards of our camp, then halted. After a short interval, two of the men rode up and, after exchanging greetings, asked what we were doing there. They were told we were attempting to find a ruined city. To this they replied they did not believe a word of what we said. They suspected we were looking for gold, and they had come to take our equipment and supplies from us. We asked if they were government soldiers, to which they replied they did not recognize any government, as the strongest party was the one that won in that country. As they saw no evidence of firearms, I believe they came to the conclusion that there must be a larger force than was evidenced by what they could see. They returned to their band to talk over the situation. After a time, the two came back and told us that if we submitted peacefully, they would not harm any of us, but if we did not, they would advance and shoot everyone who showed resistance. We were given 10 minutes to decide, and after that time, they would advance without further preliminaries. To this, Jas replied that we would neither resist nor surrender. This seemed to anger them, and wheeling their horses, they started back towards the band, waving their arms. Then the whole band came toward us at full gallop. I confess that I was badly frightened, but almost instantly we seemed to be surrounded by a number of shadowy forms on horseback galloping around us. Then these forms became more lifelike and increased in number. Evidently, our visitors had seen what we were witnessing, for their horses were either reined in quickly or stopped of their own accord as they began to rear or plunge and get beyond control of their riders. In a moment, there was wild confusion among the band, which numbered about 75 horsemen. The horses began plunging right and left beyond all control of the riders, and this ended in a wild retreat with our phantom horsemen, as we call them, in close pursuit. After the excitement was over, our chief and two of the party, including myself, walked out to where the main band had halted and could find no tracks except those made by the robbers themselves. We were very much mystified at this, since the relief had looked as real to us as the bandits, and the rescuers had seemed to have come from all sides. We fully expected to find the tracks of their horses in the sand, as well as the tracks of the horses the bandits were riding. When we returned, Jess said the phantom horsemen, as you call them, were only pictures, made so real that you, as well as the bandits, could see them. In a word, they were the pictures of other occurrences that we were able to produce in so lifelike a manner that they could not be distinguished from the real occurrences. We were able to produce them for our own protection as well as for that of others, and no one has been harmed. Where a definite purpose is served, there is no harm in the outcome. A doubt had arisen in the minds of the bandits. It was not logical that an expedition like this would venture so far away without some protection, and we were able to take advantage of this to frighten them. They are very superstitious and always on the lookout for trickery. That type is the most susceptible to fear, and they just saw what they expected to find. If we had not used this method, we should in all probability have been obliged to destroy a number of the band before they would have left us in peace. As it is, we shall hear no more of them. We were not molested again. The beautiful lady continued, if you could only see that the tragedy of Jesus' life ended with the crucifixion, if you could only see that the tragedy of Jesus' life ended with the crucifixion, that the joy of the Christ life began with the resurrection, and that the goal of every life should be the resurrection rather than the crucifixion. In this way, all may follow him into the more abundant life of the Christ in them. Can you think of a more joyous and abundant life than to be one with this mighty power, this power of the Christ within? It is here you may know that you were created to have dominion over every form, thought, word, or condition. And living this life, which is the fulfillment of every need, you will find that you are living an exact scientific life. Jesus increased the few loaves and fishes the little lad had, so he was able to supply ample for the multitude. You will observe that he bade them sit down in an orderly, expectant attitude, ready to receive the increased supply by fulfilling the law. If you are to find joy and satisfaction in the life of Jesus, you must fulfill the law of his life by acting in harmony with his ideals. You cannot stand in worry as to how you are to be fed. If Jesus had allowed this, the multitude never would have been satisfied. Instead, he quietly blessed and gave thanks for that which he had, and the supply was increased in sufficient measure to meet every need. Living did not become a difficult problem until man disobeyed and refused to listen to the inner voice. When he returns and again learns to listen to that inner voice, he will cease to labor for the means of a living, but he will work for the joy of creating. He will enter into the joy of creating, and he will create under the law of the Lord, or word of God. Through his word, he will find that he can move upon the all-loving and all unfolding substance of God, and bring into visibility every ideal he holds in thought. It was in this way, step by step, that Jesus mounted to the heights and proved the supremacy of the Christ in him over the limited concept of mortal thought. When this is realized, work becomes a joyous quality of one's being. Jesus proved that the truly spiritual life is the only joyous life. He became clothed with dignity and glory because of his victory. Yet that victory left him as free as a little child. Although the world is not wholly awake to its desire, it is this desire of joy and great blessing that it is seeking. Many may seek satisfaction in the pursuit of personal things, unmindful of the law that says he shall lose that which he seeks for selfish gain. But through the losing, he soon finds that the fall of the personal but marks the ascent of the spiritual. He realizes that man's extremity is God's opportunity. You must know that you are entitled to every good and perfect gift of God, and you must prepare to receive those gifts through the knowledge of God as your divine Father. If you separate yourself from God in thought, you will also separate yourself from him in manifestation. In order to enter fully into the joy of life, you must seek life and joy for the fullness and joy that life gives to all humanity. The laws for the establishment of heaven here on earth, which Jesus taught and which you have seen applied in a very small measure, are exact and scientific. Man, being the son and true likeness of God, contains within himself the true spirit of God, his Father. He can discern and use the laws of his creative parent and bring them into full operation in his world of affairs, if he only will. Then she said they would be pleased to answer any question he might like to ask. Ray said he did not have any questions to ask, for he had been too deeply stirred to want to ask questions. He just wanted to think. It's a good response. You can't bother me. Shut up. We get shut up, we get quiet just listening and reading these books. He said he had had some things he wanted to say. He had hoped they would not take offense, for offense was not intended in any way. He continued, "We came here, as we supposed, to find the remains of a people long since dead and gone. Instead, we find a people living a far more wonderful and active life than can be comprehended. If this thing that we have seen could be heralded abroad, you would have the whole world bowing at your feet." The three ladies said they did not wish for the world to bow at their feet, but they longed to see all mankind bowing at God's feet. They went on to say that mankind already had too many idols. The ideal was the thing really needed. Here the visitors, with the exception of the one who had called at the door of the tent, arose, saying they must be on their way. With hearty handshakes and Godspeed and invitations to them at any time, they disappeared as suddenly as they had come, leaving Ray and his party staring at the place where they had stood. After a moment, he turned to the man who had remained and asked his name. He was told that it was Baird T. Then Ray said to him, "Do you mean to say that you are able to come and go at will without any visible means of conveyance, as we have just seen, defying every known law of gravity and physics?" Baird T. answered, "We do not defy any law, neither do we harm a single law of man or God. We cooperate with and work according to all laws, both of nature and God. The means of locomotion which we use, although invisible to you, are perfectly visible to us. The trouble is you do not see them, consequently you do not believe. We see, believe, and know we are able to utilize them. When you open your understanding to know and see and use them, you will soon find that the law which we use is definite and far more capable of being put to greater uses for mankind than the limited laws which you see and use. Someday you will find that you have only touched the surface of man's possibilities. We are always pleased to assist you in any way we can. All right, and we're gonna call it there for today. It was likewise incredible stuff. And tomorrow's Monday. I hope to get a video put out first thing, but if not, it may be in the evening. Sure, right now. But all right, friends. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you again soon.